Imagine waking up to find your country's largest bank, trusted, stable, too big to fail, suddenly frozen. Not by cyber attack, not by internal collapse, but by a foreign government 8,000 miles away. This isn't the plot of a political thriller. This is the very real warning global banks just received from the US Treasury. The message: if you handle Chinese transactions for Iranian oil, even if the deal's done in yuan, even if you're not American, you could lose access to the entire US financial system. No more dollar clearing, no SWIFT, no US intermediaries. A single misstep and your bank could go dark overnight. But here's the twist. The more Washington tightens its grip, the more the world accelerates its plans to operate without it. Behind closed doors in Hong Kong, April 2025, US Treasury officials didn't arrive to negotiate. They came to deliver a warning. Not just to China, but to the global banking network. If you process oil revenue tied to Iran, especially where China's involved, you could be next. Bloomberg and CNBC confirmed it. This was one of the most aggressive financial ultimatums in decades. It wasn't idle talk. Within 2 weeks, 9 Hong Kong-based firms were sanctioned. Their crime? Allegedly laundering oil money through fake shipping docks tied to Iran's Revolutionary Guard. But this wasn't just about oil, it was about control. A test case. A warning shot. Because here's the deeper game. China now imports over 1 million barrels of Iranian oil every day, 91% of Tehran's total exports. And it's not using dollars. It's paying in yuan. Washington isn't just targeting Iranian energy. It's trying to dismantle a fast-growing non-dollar trade loop, one that's beginning to work. But pressure cuts both ways. As the US leans harder, it risks snapping the very system it built. The more aggressively it deploys financial blackmail, the more likely it is to provoke the one thing it fears most: a global move away from the dollar itself. Hong Kong's banking giants now find themselves in the crosshairs. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Treasury has pressured major institutions, HSBC, Bank of China, Hong Kong, and others, to pierce corporate veils and expose the real owners of accounts tied to Iranian oil, especially those transacting in renminbi or any other non-dollar currency. These aren't small banks. In Q1 2025, Hong Kong handled over $260 billion in cross-border settlements. More than half, 54.3%, was done in yuan, surpassing the dollar for the first time. The symbolic blow alone is enormous. What's unprecedented isn't the sanctions, it's the jurisdictional reach. The US is telling foreign banks, outside US borders, to enforce American law, to become effectively offshore arms of the US Treasury. Experts like Max Maish at FDD warn, without formal designation or oversight, this kind of enforcement isn't regulation, it's coercion. And what if these banks push back? Or worse, align more deeply with China's alternative system? This isn't just about money. It's strategic. Under a 2021 pact, China secured long-term access to Iranian oil at a 12% discount and a locked-in premium buffer, all priced in yuan. That deal didn't just lock in energy. It directly undermined dollar hegemony. Every new round of sanctions Washington imposes to choke off that trade doesn't deter Beijing. It emboldens it. By March 2025, China's yuan-based cross-border payments reached $725 billion, up 22% year over year. According to Bloomberg, the yuan now accounts for over 4.113% of global payment value, the highest on record. This isn't a workaround, it's a prototype. And the US, by trying to cut it off, might be accelerating the very outcome it wants to prevent: a post-dollar oil economy. Now zoom out. Imagine you're an overseas manufacturer weighing a move to the US. You're told it's a great time, strong consumer base, reshoring incentives. But then you look at the data. Consumer sentiment, as of April 2025, has plunged to its second lowest level ever. Inflation expectations hit 5.6%, a figure not seen since 1981. Profit margins in retail and wholesale? Down 1.6% in just 1 month, the sharpest decline in over a decade. And that's before you factor in tariffs. Steel import prices are up 25% year over year. Since 2023, retail profits have fallen in 15 of the past 17 months. The story beneath the numbers is simple. The American consumer, long the engine of global demand, is weakening. Fast. Now consider the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, President Trump's promise of permanence for the 2017 tax cuts. Buried deep in that legislation is a clause few are talking about. If passed, it would give the White House power to impose retaliatory taxes on any foreign country seen as treating U.S. firms unfairly. But what's unfair? There's no legal definition, and enforcement would lie entirely with the executive branch. The penalties? A 5-point increase in taxes on U.S.-sourced income of foreign companies. A jump in withholding taxes on outbound payments from 10% to 12.5%. According to the Congressional Budget Office and a May 2025 Tax Foundation analysis, that could slash foreign direct investment into the U.S. by as much as $91 billion annually. And here's the contradiction. The very policy meant to supercharge American investment could end up driving it away. Higher taxes, policy instability, threats of retaliation. It's not a playbook for confidence, it's a roadmap to hesitation. Even Besson, testifying before Congress, insisted the bill would stabilize deficit to GDP ratios. But the Joint Committee on Taxation's early scoring shows deficits rising across multiple income brackets. So what began as a push to defend U.S. dominance, of energy, of trade, of currency, might be turning into something else. A slow-motion exit from the very system America built to lead. They say sanctions are a tool, but in practice they're more like dynamite. The U.S. Treasury has made its stance clear. Any foreign institution helping sanction trade, especially the shadowy web of Iranian oil sales funneled through Chinese backchannels, risks being cut off from dollar clearing. That's not just a penalty. It's exile from the beating heart of global finance. But here's the twist. Every threat meant to suppress rogue behavior is accelerating the very outcome Washington dreads most. The yuan is rising, not slowly, not theoretically, but with momentum. In March 2025 alone, cross-border renminbi transactions hit $724.9 billion. That's over half of China's global trade, up from just 36% 2 years ago. Swift data now ranks the yuan as the fourth most used currency globally, claiming a record 4.13% of payment value. These aren't just numbers. They're milestones in a deliberate campaign. Beijing isn't reacting, it's strategizing. In April, the People's Bank of China began rewarding state-owned enterprises that settle contracts in yuan. Not suggested, not encouraged, rewarded. China's deputy central bank governor, Liu Lei, didn't mince words. The multilateral trading system is blocked. Tariff walls are strangling the global economic cycle. And while the West leans on sanctions, China builds alternatives. The irony is cutting. Every sanction designed to isolate Iran or contain China is now a blueprint, teaching other nations how to isolate the US dollar instead. But what replaces it? Imagine you're the CFO of a Japanese car giant. Profits are rising until you bring them home. In 2025 alone, the dollar has dropped 8.1% against the yen. Margins vanish. Meanwhile, Washington unveils a sweeping new tax proposal. A 5-point corporate rate hike on foreign firms, plus new withholding taxes on outbound payments. According to the Tax Foundation, that could bleed $91 billion annually from foreign direct investment into the U.S., and the hits keep coming. April data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows U.S. manufacturing job growth stalled. Real wages dipped again, down 0.3% quarter over quarter. Add regulatory chaos to the mix. Tariffs that swing wildly from 10% to 30%, only to be paused, then reimposed. Foreign firms are left guessing which rulebook applies tomorrow, so they retreat. Bloomberg confirms it. 246 major U.S. companies have filed for bankruptcy so far this year, the highest in 15 years. Volatility isn't just bad policy, it's bad business. Trump's strategy hinges on pressure. But pressure without consistency isn't strategy, it's turbulence. Since January, tariffs on Chinese imports have swung back and forth like a pendulum. And even though they're expected to hold steady through late 2025, the damage is already done. Chinese exports to the U.S. are collapsing. China's industrial output is slowing. And yet the uncertainty may be more corrosive than the tariffs themselves. Sam Jacome, economist at EFG Asset Management, puts it bluntly. Trump's first term taught the world not to trust U.S. economic agreements. Now businesses aren't just pricing in tariffs, they're pricing in chaos. Retailers hoard inventory. Manufacturers freeze investment. No one wants to gamble billions on a moving target. Even a tariff truce announced in May landed with a thud. The problem isn't confrontation, it's confusion. And no one is investing into confusion. Then comes the escalation. In May, the U.S. didn't just blacklist 9 Hong Kong-based non-banks for masking Iranian oil sales. Treasury officials flew to Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, pressuring major banks to investigate non-dollar transactions tied to the flows. Many of these deals routed through Chinese shell firms, and the implication was clear: cooperate or lose access to the dollar system. Max Masich of the Foundation for Defensive Democracies says designating these banks would be the nuclear option, one that risks financial blowback across continents. The threat is real. These Hong Kong banks operate in Europe, in the US, across global dollar clearing networks. Sanctioning them wouldn't just isolate China. It could fracture the banking system. But while Washington plays hardball, Beijing builds resilience. In April, China expanded its digital yuan pilot for cross-border trade in Southeast Asia, dodging the dollar entirely. This isn't a beta test. It's a prototype for a world where the dollar is optional. By weaponizing dollar access, Washington is teaching the world to live without it. And that shift, it's not theoretical anymore. It's happening because dollar dominance was never just about economics. It was about trust, predictability, stability. But what happens when even allies, trade partners, global banks start to doubt that access will remain legal, consistent, or fair? The more the US flexes its financial privilege, the more the world begins to ask, is it still worth the cost? China isn't fighting back with missiles. It's using spreadsheets, oil contracts, and payment systems. And it's finding allies, quietly, steadily, strategically. But here's the cliffhanger. If the global banking order breaks under the weight of sanctions, tariffs, and confusion, what rises in its place? Who writes the new rules? And will the next global reserve currency be backed by trust or by politics? Let us know what you think. Has the US strategy gone too far? Or is this just the price of global leadership in a fractured world?